Okay, it's 6 o'clock and we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to everyone for coming. I'm Reve Moran. I'm with the League of Women Voters of Santa Barbara. Before we get started, I would like to, because this week is going to be, next week is Indigenous Peoples Day, I would like to respectfully acknowledge this land that we are on is Chumash land. And the Native Americans were sadly, ironically, which really isn't the correct word, ironically the last group of people who were given citizenship and the right to vote. It wasn't until 1965, when the Voting Rights Act was passed, that they were given full citizenship and the right to vote, and it still has some issues today. That was at the federal level anyway. We're holding these candidate forums as public service to all voters. What we would like is for all voters to be as well informed as possible, and when you go to fill out your ballots, that you know who the candidates are and what the issues are that are being represented. The mail-in ballots are going to be mailed out on October 7th, so that's coming up, so look for your packet in the mail. When you go to fill out your ballot, please follow the instructions that comes with your ballot carefully. For example, be sure to sign your ballot on the outside of the envelope before you return it. Our next forum will be held on Thursday, October 3rd at 6 p.m. this Thursday, and this is going to be at the same location. We're going to have the two top vote getters for the state assembly race in District 37. We'll have Greg Hart, the incumbent, and his challenger, Sari Dominguez, for that forum. So please join us at that one. Another forum I'd like to highlight is our pros and cons forum, where on October 9th at 5 p.m. It will be held as a Zoom webinar. You can get the link on our website. We will be discussing all the local ballot measures as well as many of the state propositions. You can ask questions during that Zoom webinar by inserting questions in the chat function. So the link for the webinar is shown on our website. Also posted on our website is the complete list of forums that we will hold prior to the presidential election in November. So our website address, which is now shown on the screen, is LWV for League of Women Voters, SantaBarbara.org. You can get a full list of all of our forums on that website. We also are advertising them in both the Independent and in The Voice, so you can see the complete list of forums. So I'd like to express our thanks to the Community Environmental Council for hosting our forum at this beautiful location. It's really nice. And we also owe a big thank you to TVSB for recording our forums, and they will be available on our website for later viewing. And because we have Silvia Uribe from TransLPro, who's providing simultaneous interpretation in Spanish, we'll be able to post the recordings in both English and Spanish on our website. That will be on our YouTube channel. If you go to our homepage and you go to the bottom, there's a little icon for YouTube, and that's where you'll find our forums, our recordings. Finally, we want to thank the Santa Barbara Goleta Valley branch of AAUW, the American Association of University Women, for co-sponsoring our forums. So let's move on to our forum. Many of you may know our moderator because he served as Santa Barbara's County Council from 1994 to 2008. After retiring, Shane became president of our education forum, and following consolidation of our education fund with our league, then he continued as a valuable member of our executive board. So please, in addition, he's a member of Santa Barbara's local agency formation commission, LAFCO, where he represents the interests of the public in receiving good, orderly government services. So please join me in welcoming Shane Stark, tonight's moderator.
Thank you, Uribe. I should note at the outset that I've made it my mission to put the laugh back in LAFCO. Thus far, utterly unsuccessful, I should tell you. We are dividing, I should probably tell you, we are dividing this forum into two parts. The first part, we'll have the second district candidates, Mike Jordan, Tara Taylor. And then the second half of this, we will have the first district and the third district candidates, and that conclude the forum. Sometime toward the end of the first part of the forum, we'll take a break. We will collect questions that the audience members have written on the card, and we'll screen them so that we can get you some questions with direct audience participation. We'll take a short break. We'll finish the questions. We'll say farewell to our good Mesa Rat candidates. I should confess I'm a Mesa Rat. Mesa Rat. And then we will repeat it with the first district and the third district candidates. So I'll name them now. For the first district, we have Cruzito Cruz, Alejandra Gutierrez, and Wendy Santamaria. And for the third district, we have Tony Becerra, hope I pronounced that correctly, and Oscar Gutierrez. So let's start the candidate forum. I ask you to please refrain from outbursts and displays, signs, t-shirts, no fruit. And you can't throw the fruit, particularly no fruit at the moderator. In any event, hold your applause till the end. This will help us get through more questions and maintain our neutral tone. I'd like to introduce Mike Jordan and Tara Taylor, the two candidates for the City Council for Santa Barbara from the 2nd District. Here's how our forum works. We follow the traditional League of Women Voters process and ground rules, which the candidates have agreed to. To maintain civility, the key word, civility, and the issue-oriented nature of our forum, we don't allow negative comments about other candidates' character and qualifications, but rather ask the speakers to address their own qualifications and vision for office and their views on issues facing the city of Santa Barbara. Criticism of an opponent's actions and positions on issues are permissible. No character attacks. You can criticize positions and issues. We will start with a 2-minute opening statement for each candidate. We ask you to focus on your qualifications, your motivation, your main priorities, and your main concerns. After you finish with that, I'll ask some questions. You have up to 90 seconds to respond to each question. If you can respond in less time, that's fine too. Even if you agree with your opponent, you can simply indicate that you agree. That way we can get more questions in. Our high-tech timer, straight from Vandenberg Space Force Base and controlled by a secret AI bot, hitherto unknown, Votron. In any event, we'll rotate the order of responses. Again, to the audience, if you have questions for the candidates, please write them on the little index cards, and our card collectors will give you, or you've picked up, and return them during the first part of the forum. We will sort them, and then after the break, ask more questions as time permits. Then we'll say goodbye, repeat the process. So let's have the opening statements. I would select Ms. Taylor to go first.
Good evening. I want to start by saying thank you very much to the League of Women Voters and to the Community Environmental Council, as well as Mike Jordan, for being here tonight and making this event possible so that we have the opportunity both to connect with the community and for the community to present issues and concerns to us so that we can better represent you, hopefully. The position that I'm seeking is as the council representative for the Mesa District, District 2. And the reason why I am seeking that position is I have an extensive amount of experience serving communities here in Santa Barbara and in other places in the nation. And I want to take that because I see an opportunity to convey and assist in certain areas and conversations that are happening in the city in a way I think that adds new perspective. I also think that it's very important that we have options. So when we have these local elections, that we have more than just one person to run, that we have a selection. And I think that we'll see that roll up into a later state in our election process here in the United States so we have a better quality of candidates. And on that, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I see my time is running down. And I thank you all very much for being here this evening. And I hope you choose me as your representative.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan.
Thank you. I'd echo the thank yous to everybody. My family and I are almost 40-year residents of the Mesa. We're the third of 5 generations to live in our house on the Mesa. Much of my outlook over my public service, in addition to working a real job in the city, has focused on those on those next 2 generations, the generation of our children and our grandchildren that are all in town. I look to make government work better for the people in the moment, make it work better for the future generations, to bring a hope and a stability to the future generations that will be able to grow up, stay in the city, have a job, have a place to live. My approach has been to be engaged and responsive, both at the district and citywide level, something I intend to keep on doing. I bring with me experience working in the city structure as a member of the Creeks Advisory Committee, Planning Commissioner, and then elected to City Council. My sort of analogous work outside that was a Governor Brown regional appointee to the Water Board, State Water Board, and I've also served on the board of both the Santa Barbara YMCA, the Downtown Organization, and Visit Santa Barbara. So thank you and happy to be here. I would echo Tara, if I can say Tara's comment also. It seems like there's been a real drought in opportunity and coverage in the 2nd District, and I'm thankful that we both get an opportunity to talk together and listen to people out in the audience share their questions, because without that, it just wouldn't have happened. So thanks.
Thank you. And now it's time for our first question. The office that you seek requires an oath to support and defend the constitutions of the United States and the state of California. The Constitution can mean different things to different people. What does the Constitution mean to you? I'll start with Mr. Jordan.
So I view the Constitution as a framework for shared vision, shared success, I don't know how many times that's going to do that while I'm talking, right? But shared success for every member of a community, or just take that up the food chain of a nation. I think that it is a framework that allows those who believe in tomorrow, believe in community, believe in constructive collaboration and problem solving to find a basis of understanding that allows that to be manifested. I think it's just the differentiation between whether it's a federal or a state, I think they both have the same intent. And I believe that they set the stage for us to be successful if we so choose to follow the tenets, to be good neighbors, to be good citizens, and to work together.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
When you're thinking about the future, it's always a good idea to stop every once in a while, especially when you're thinking about a long-term shared future. To stop every once in a while and look back and think what the intent was at the beginning. And having the longest standing constitution in the world is something that I'm very proud of as an American. It's a foundation for us to rely on and to depend on when we have to try and sort things out in today's society, in today's laws. And other than that, I would agree a lot with what Mike said.
Thank you. The next question is about homelessness and encampments. It was recently announced that the city will be receiving less state funds for programs related for homelessness, despite, I believe, the city spending a great deal of money on programs to combat homelessness. The Supreme Court's recent grants pass decision removes the Eighth Amendment prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment as a barrier to enforcement of camping ordinances, but does not remove the need to treat persons who are homeless with dignity and respect for their persons, particularly the mentally ill and victims of domestic violence. What's your approach to encampments, housing for the homeless, and other issues with a large number of people experiencing homelessness? And we'll go with Ms. Taylor.
I'd like to start by saying that homelessness is not a crime. Poverty is not a crime. And that it's very important that whatever processes and decisions that we make as a community, that we're remembering that we're dealing with human beings. That being said, I believe that homeless encampments, when you see entire villages of homeless people living together, that speaks so much of something that's broken in that community. And it's very important for those people who live in those encampments for that situation to be dissolved as quickly as possible. Obviously, with programs and support and opportunities to help them sustain housing for the long term. And that's all I have on that.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan.
I think you guys know the timer's acting up, right? There was 56 minutes left in the quarter.
Now you have 90 minutes to answer a question on homelessness.
First, I will do nothing to address that question without leading with compassion. The recent Supreme Court decision that you referred to, I think, is a red herring that at best allows people to push people out of one area into a neighboring area without solving the problem. So I'm thankful that I work for a city and a community that handles the problem with compassion every day and won't just relate it to a legal ruling that allows you to push people out of its borders into a neighboring community. If this problem was easily solvable, it certainly would have been solved by now by somebody. I think the recent successes that we can point to in the city particularly lead one to hopefully feel better about it. The tiny homes project that's downtown, the recently opened one out on Hollister Avenue, the county's purchase of the Motel 8, the Super 8 out in Goleta. All of these show potential on the ability to get people off the street who formerly would not leave because they couldn't leave things like their pets, their privacy, or their belongings behind. And it begins to see some return on just a huge, huge problem that sucks up a lot of funds.
Thank you. Our next question is about multimodal transportation. That's a concept. Can pedestrians, bicycles, e-bikes and cars coexist. What's your solution? And
So-
you're next. You're up.
I'm up, thanks.
We're
So
rotating. It's easy with
I'm
two.
not too certain on the answer as it approaches e-bikes, so I'm going to set that one aside for right now. But if you're longing for a tangible example of a multimodal success, that would be the Las Positas multimodal path that was put in a couple years ago that allows bicycles to get off the road and have a safe place to go, but at the same time is multimodal and allows pedestrians and bicycles that are not running down the road at a high speed to be on it. We are close to having one of those also in District 2 on Cliff Drive that will separate bicycles outside of the lane of traffic, allow pedestrians better crossing with lighted crosswalks and stop signals up and down that corridor. And projects like that not only benefit immediately by building better safety for the community, but they also solve the question of, will I bike or will I walk when I don't have a safe way to do it? And encourage that in a sort of passive manner that gets people out of their cars, enjoying themselves, offers safe routes to school for your children, and just overall improves the community.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
Sorry. I do believe that having multimodal transportation, walkers, bikers, skateboards, is possible, but with standards and considerations. For instance, perhaps thinking about speed limits, or even maybe for a place like State Street, if you're thinking about that area, limiting it to just children who are allowed to ride their bicycles, and the adults have to walk along beside them. It's just a matter of making sure that those of us who are walking in the area, or standing, or shopping, coming out of a store or something like that, or leaving a restaurant, that we're not going to get knocked over and be injured.
Thank you. I've come to the conclusion there's no actual evidence that the people on e-bikes are trying to knock off the seniors as they try to get their lunch. Next question is about Measure I and city finances. The city faces a budget deficit estimated at between $7 and $10 million. The city council placed a half-cent sales tax increase, Measure I, on the November ballot. It's estimated to raise about $15 million. It's a general tax, and the proceeds can be spent on any government use. We'd like to know whether you favor the tax or are opposed to it, and what are your priorities for the revenue if the tax passes, and what will you cut if it doesn't? I think Ms. Taylor is
In this day and age, where more and more of us are shopping online and choosing to stay home and purchase our goods, I can't support things that continue to add to discourage people from going out and shopping in their local communities. So things like sales taxes, increasing parking costs, these are things that I think encourage people to take the route of purchasing from their desktop on home instead of coming out into the shops and being part of the community that we have here. So sales taxes, so what do you do when you have such an astounding budget shortfall and deficit? And I think that's where we have to be kind of creative. And I see other communities trying new things. For instance, and I know that Mike Jordan has mentioned this in the past as well, unit vacancy rates or costs. These are another way that we could look at. Some other communities are looking at to offset deficits and ensure that the funds are there to cover such things. And we also have to look at what caused such a deficit. I mean, that's a pretty astounding deficit, and the the gap in the amount from being from $7 to $11 million. Originally, the conversation was it being $11 million, and then additional funds were found. That's a little disconcerting to me as a former banker, that you have this much of a gap and this much of a deficit.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan.
Thank you. So I support the measure in that it deserves to be on the ballot. It clearly needs to be an answer that is addressed by the voters as to the path going forward. I would, in terms of the comment on it goes into the general fund and it's unrestricted, I would point to the last 5 or 8 years of success of Measure C, which was the last initiative that the city passed and promised to work on roads and building a new police station. And I don't think you can walk outside anywhere for 5 minutes and not see roads being worked on in the city and brought up to speed. And we're just about to start construction on a police station. The priorities that I would employ or use if it was passed are the same that are on the initiative itself, and that is public safety, first responders having to do with fire safety, homelessness. There's about 4 or 5 others, but those 3 top the list for me. If it doesn't pass, I think we will somehow find a way to creatively live that way, but I see a time coming where a full-service city like this, with all of the components of the cities we have, that others do not, those that are even right next to us, will have to start to rethink that type of structure.
Thank you. My next question is about State Street. Everybody has an opinion about State Street. My question is, you want to ban cars on State Street? If so, where? And also, do you support the adaptive reuse of empty buildings?
So you may have to remind me about that second part of the question before I go too far, okay?
Okay.
So I see a version of State Street in the future that is evolving to a combination of cars and more pedestrian-oriented for families, children, and old people. I think clearly retail is in a different place than it was 20 years ago. Structurally, the type of buildings that are on the ground are ill-suited for today's retail. If you compare them to Coast Village Road, the buildings are wide and not deep. Ours are skinny and very deep. And people want to walk where they can look at a store and see all of the store. So I think there's some challenges on redesigning downtown to meet that vision of where the cars will be, where the pedestrian-oriented zones are. I like the pedestrian-oriented zones being in the middle between the development at Paseo Nuevo and the bottom of State Street behind the Staples building. I think that's a natural zone. What was the second part of your question?
Adaptive reuse of empty office buildings.
Definitely thumbs up on that. There are some real challenges with the ages and building structures of these 100-plus-year-old buildings in the downtown to reuse them and meet state building codes. But definitely thumbs up on that.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
I think that the city of Santa Barbara has really made every effort. In the years that I've been here, I can see how proactive the community has been in reaching out to the residents of the community and saying, come participate, give us your feedback. And that is speaks to me very loudly about what type of a close-knit community this is. And that being said, I think that there's been basically a lot of futzing with State Street. And through COVID and a lot of different hands and a lot of different attempts, and sometimes it's good maybe just to let things settle for a little bit and go focus on other areas and aspects. For instance, our Mesa 2 district, it's one of those things we want to make sure that we don't get so hyper-focused on any portion of the city that we're neglecting any other portions. As far as conversion and reuse of old buildings, I'm a former mortgage banker, so I highly support that sort of thing. And the idea of a live, work, play community, that is just met with success in various places throughout the nation. So looking at how we're going to reuse commercial real estate in the future and adapt it into our community, I've seen a lot of creativity with that, and I think it can be very successful.
Thank you. Before we do the next question, I'd like to remind people to fill out your cards with the questions and hand them to our league volunteers so we can get them. Otherwise, we'll just keep going with the questions we've got. Our next question is about housing. It's from our housing committee. If you didn't know, we have a very active housing committee, and they have a really nifty thing on the league website, which you can log into, and it gives you all sorts of data about local housing conditions. Highly recommend it. The city has seen significant development of market rate housing for households earning above 120% of the median income in recent years. However, we continue to fall well short of building and meeting our affordable housing goals for moderate to lower income residents. Given this shortfall, what specific strategies should the city pursue to close this gap between market rate and affordable housing and maximize housing production for moderate and low income households? And I believe you're first. No, you're first. Ms. Taylor is first.
Housing is always going to be an issue in Santa Barbara. You cannot have a community that is this astoundingly beautiful with temperatures that remain this moderate all year long and not have a situation where everybody from around the country wants to retire and bring their resources and then compete for housing here. And that competition of housing is going to push the lower rung of people out at the bottom. And that is where homelessness comes from. That is where the need for affordable housing comes from. So it's something that we have to look at and say, obviously we need to look at increasing taxes as people move in and purchase new properties, because that is the cause of that. We also need to ask ourselves, is there really a need for a lot of additional housing, or could we be more creative about how we manage the housing that we have here currently? And I think that's more important, because when you look at, there is an exodus of people leaving California. It's the first time in decades that it's been the case that the population is actually leaving instead of coming. We're having smaller families, and even, you know, in many ways the populations are kind of settling and coming down. The market is kind of solving the problem. So we have to ask ourselves, do we need to build more housing? And if we do, you know, what's the risk of that?
Mr. Jordan.
Thank you. So I don't think it would be a secret for somebody who's an incumbent in City Council to say we can do better than we have done. The demise of affordable housing history in the city started with the states axing what's called the RDA, redevelopment agencies, where 20% of increase of property taxes was held and automatically went to affordable housing in the city. And since that time, we have struggled to come up both with a mechanism or pathway, but more importantly, struggled to come up with funding that addresses who will and how will we pay for that. And we could certainly do better. Things the city have done recently to improve that are the establishment of a housing trust fund, where we have put money into it specifically to use as leverage with organizations like the Housing Authority of Santa Barbara. We just closed on two very large loans, both to Housing Authority and Habitat for Humanity, I hope that's the right one, of the several, and ran that fund down to zero, a $5 million fund down to zero, and now we're working to replenish it. But those type of changes, along with additions or improvements to the way we zone, the ordinances that prohibits work, live in the downtown, that type of thing, all of those are needed to be tools that we can improve upon and use.
Thank you. You already went? Okay, we're good. My next question is about land use planning. Some people say that the rigorous planning standards of Santa Barbara give it its character and charm. Well, others say that the planning process is an expensive burden that makes housing even less affordable. What's your view, and if any, a proposal for change of the process?
It's over here now.
You're good.
We'll keep track for you.
Thanks.
I would hazard of those two choices, I would take the first choice, as historically been the Santa Barbara personality, one of slow growth or extensive examination of every single project that equates to slow growth. I think it's generally getting better until you talk about what the state of California is mandating upon the city. Then I think it's generally getting worse as to the results. I see it still as a work in progress. I think it's a focus with every sitting council member and with every staff member in community development on how to get rid of the shackles that have historically slowed production of housing or production of redevelopment down and caused it to either fail or cost so much that it's infeasible. I think we just continue to work on it. In 90 seconds, I'm not going to be able to talk about items that I know that have improved that, but I believe it's on the pathway with both the executive team and the department heads that we have right now, that we are making improvements day to day, and we are committed to making it better.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
Mark, my partner, and I were walking down Shoreline the other day on the Mesa, and one of the things we were talking about is the idea that this is a community where people can live across the street and have an ocean view. You know, they still have their ocean view, but we as the people still have our Shoreline Park. And I think that that is such a testament to how Santa Barbara has been very cautious in development and has, from the very beginning, looked at it from a perspective of how can we preserve this beautiful place as much as possible, but still recognize that people want to live here. And I've watched, I'm a history buff, so I've watched the evolution of the city go from when it's first began its development way back when, and then seeing the foothills be developed and fill in to where we are today. So we can continue that path. There are lots of nooks and crannies. I see them all the time as a former mortgage banker, underutilized real estate here in Santa Barbara. But we need to ask ourselves again, what is the long-term impact of that? When we think about things like going to the courthouse and laying our blankets down, how many more residents can we have here in the city and still have these aspects of the city that we take for granted as being part of Santa Barbara?
Thank you. I'm going to ask two more questions, and then I'm going to check and see where we are in terms of audience questions. Seems like a reasonable thing to do. My next question is about jobs and business. What can the city do to attract non-polluting businesses that produce useful goods and services and generate good jobs? And how can the city help the existing small businesses in the city?
I absolutely love this question. I've been volunteering for a program called 1 Million Cups for almost 10 years now. And it's a free community environment entrepreneurial program. And one of the things I stress in that program on a regular basis is that new business doesn't have to be production of goods. It doesn't have to have a negative environmental impact. As a matter of fact, new businesses nowadays, more and more so, I think particularly in California, particularly in the United States of America, we can say, how do we as entrepreneurs solve these global environmental problems? And you're just seeing astounding things. For instance, one of the people who presented at my entrepreneurial program is a man who devised a machine that you can sit on your countertop in your kitchen and put your plastic film into it. Your plastic bags, your cereal bags, your meat wrappers, you clean them off and you put them in there, and it shapes them into a disc, a little hard disc. And that disc is recyclable. You just drop it in your recycle bin. That is phenomenal to me. And more we're seeing people come up with these solutions that both may empower us to be more environmentally conscious and decrease our impact on the environment, but also on a grander macro scale. The folks who are coming up, the Elon Musk who are coming up with ideas on solar energy and wind energy and wave energy. It's very interesting, the future.
Mr. Taylor.
So I think most of this answer can actually refer back to your prior question on how do things get through the process. Green or not, sustainable or not, the number one, I think, dynamic that inhibits existing or new businesses in the city are the processes you have to go to either to start a new business or remodel or improve an existing business. The city is committed to environmentally forward-looking development. We have recently formed an entire department around that, sustainability and resilience department. So internally, we are walking the talk and talking the talk, and in addition to just looking for sustainability, we're linking that sustainability or lack of it to the consequences of resilience, whether that's climate change, things like debris flows, too much rain, too little rain, that type of thing. The other answer I would give you to the actual question is that historically cities have kind of let the evolution of what you're talking about take place, but it's clear that the city needs to be a greater partner and employ some type of private-public partnerships to incentivize and move in the direction of what you're talking about.
Thank you. It's resetting. Votron was displeased, I think. My next question is about crime and police. How do you view the relation between the Santa Barbara Police Department and the community? What would make things better?
So I think we have a great relationship in that dynamic. We're coming off a 2 or 3 year process, maybe a little more following the death of George Floyd, where we totally revamped our Fire and Police Commission from just a sort of reporting out commission to a commission that recognizes the dynamic of a modern day community and their relationship, both current and historically, with law enforcement, and provides a structured venue for high-level executive review with members of the public on police actions. I think that's a watershed moment in the history of Santa Barbara. I also believe that we have the executive team members present in our current police department that get this, that are supportive of this to the nth degree, that we realize that we're only as successful as the person that's the least represented or the most ignored in our community, particularly when put in a situation where it's someone in power dealing with them.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
When I first moved to Santa Barbara, I had the benefit of having an apartment that was located literally within a block of the police station. So everywhere I walked in the community, I walked right past the police station. And one of the first volunteer opportunities that I came across were the red shirts, the folks who were touring State Street. And I went on a tour with one of the representatives, and they were talking about the program and the requirements and expectations. And I thought that was really wonderful, that I had this accessibility and an opportunity to meet with somebody who volunteered directly. He wasn't a police officer, he volunteered with the program through the police force. And I thought that was really wonderful. I also know that Santa Barbara has one of the lowest records of violent arrests that I have ever seen in any community. So it's very obvious that they take it serious to try and do what they need to do in a way that doesn't harm anybody. And we have the Police Activities League, and if you follow the Santa Barbara Police on Facebook, you'll see lots of ways to connect with them. I think that they really do a good job in reaching out to our community and trying to interact with us, and that is where bad bad things stop and good things start.
Thank you. If I could ask you to hold on for a second while our associate comes at Claire Von Blaricum has collected the audience questions. Okay, let me turn. Okay, it's our award-winning fast question screening process. We have a question about what is your position on rent control? And here's what I'd like to phrase it. If you support rent control, what do you propose to assure that landlords have their constitutional rights to due process and a fair return met? And if you don't support rent control, what are you going to do to improve the affordability of rental housing? I think we will start with Ms. Taylor, I believe. Is that right?
Again, I am a former banker, and I am a Main Street banker. The clients that I worked with when I was in banking are the people who come to you and say, Tara, I have one house and I have a second house that's my rental, that's my retirement income. So when we think about rent control, sometimes we can actually put somebody like that in a situation where they can't pay their taxes or they can't cover their maintenance costs, and they're putting, even their residents within the rentals in jeopardy because they're not taking care of the property appropriately. So I think there are other ways to address it. I think the market can address it, and I think when communities are aware of how things like how Airbnb and other short-term vacation rentals affect the rental market in their community, and they take measures like Santa Barbara is taking to address those challenges, that's a better way to go than to put a cap on things. Also, as I mentioned before, I've heard that some other communities are employing vacancy costs. So if you have a rental unit that's sat vacant and remains vacant for more than 6 months, then that's something that the community can come and say, well, either you're not right pricing it or there's an issue with maintaining it, but there's no justifiable reason why a rental property in the city of Santa Barbara should go vacant for years.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan?
Thank you. Well, I'll just give you the short answer based on the phrase you used, but I don't support rent control. I think the devil's in the details. I actually have watched one of the forums for the other two districts, and I know that's a hot topic, but I now see people using the words rent control and rent stabilization as if they're the same thing. And I see people kind of moving to the nuance of there are other ways to define what's called rent control that might be acceptable. But in its current state, a rent control or hard rent cap, in my research and experience, does not lead to the results you want. It creates problems with maintenance. It ends up subsequently in future years leading to less rental units available than when you started with. It leads to people not being able to actually get loans for major repairs because there's not a pathway that can be approved for them to repay their loan. I see part of the answer to your question on then what would you do for more rental housing, and I would tell you that our commitment to a housing trust fund, finding funding for that, working on deals as both I and another council member have done to increase the affordable percentage on a large project at La Cumbre, working on another project at the same time too at Paseo Nuevo. I think these type of efforts need to be made by cities to look for ways to increase the percentage of affordability.
Thank you. I have another question from the audience. Actually, there are 3 questions. They're all sort of related. How will you incentivize landlords to prioritize local workers and families? How will you preserve this little housing that we have in Santa Barbara? And how will you build or support affordable housing in Santa Barbara? What plans do you have? I could say a general support of affordable
I'm going to ask
housing.
for help on all three of those. So first one was, how do you incentivize landlords to?
Prioritize local
Okay.
workers and
So I
families.
will tell you generally, the way that statement is written, it's illegal. And so the one pathway would be to lobby for legislative change allowing to do that. There are pathways that are not as written there where you can put together employer consortiums, which is one of the menu items that Eric Friedman and I have been working with on the La Cumbre project. And once you have a entity like a consortium controlling a master lease on a number of apartments, that entity can put a prioritization on their local employees getting into that. So just a blanket answer to the first one is it's illegal. Help me with the second one.
Second one, how will you preserve the little housing that we have in Santa Barbara?
So one example, and quickly, is again an action that Eric Friedman and I just brought to council a couple months ago, and that was to rein in the out-of-control short-term vacation rentals that are eroding the single-family residence stock in this city. Something like 1,500 units right now that we know of that are illegal and are all over both the coastal zone and the interior zone.
Thank you.
Way too long of a question, huh?
Yeah, well, it was several questions. Ms. Taylor.
There are a lot of projects that are on the books or in the works here in Santa Barbara that are increasing housing, and there are in the vicinity, like for instance our neighbors in Goleta, there are places that are close enough that you can get affordable housing as well too that are coming up. So I think it's one of those things for us to continue to look for opportunities like that. As I mentioned before, I see many little nooks and crannies I think people would be surprised about if you walk up and down through the city of Santa Barbara, where there are surprisingly underutilized pieces of property that could at some point in time be developed into something else. And if that's the case, that's great. That'll definitely help with the affordability. And I'm sure that many of you are aware that there are two different kinds of affordable housing. There's affordable housing with a capital A, and then there's affordable housing, they call it, with lowercase a. So affordable housing with lowercase a is kind of where you see somebody does a development and a certain portion of them are required by law to be made available for lower income housing. That's an example of lowercase a, it's privately held. Capital A housing, affordable housing, is where the government makes housing that is income-based and affordable to the community. So these are things that many communities look at and utilize in order to make sure that we have the right mix and blend to cover the people that live here in our community.
Thank you. I think we probably get one or two more questions in and then have closing statements, and then we'll clear for the other half of the forum. Here's my next question. What do you say to the youth of our district? What are the most important things that the city can do to improve the lives of its youth? I think you're first.
It is shocking to me how much Santa Barbara loves young people. When I came here, one of the things that stood up to me really immediately was the free lunch program through the summer, where any child who's less than 18 years old can go and access a meal someplace in the community for free. And as a child who grew up and went without meals, this stands out to me as a beautiful thing. The other thing is the opportunities. The programs that are available at the Santa Barbara Public Library, the organizations that are available throughout the community, just even, when you go to our playgrounds and our parks, Santa Barbara loves our children, and that is where we start. So as long as our school districts are working well with the community and the community is working well with the school districts, and also all those who are trying to offer programs such as the Santa Barbara Public Library, affordable daycare is a very big conversation in this community. I think, honestly, that should be an issue that we discuss a little bit more than I ever hear brought up. But it's hard to provide affordable childcare in a community like this when costs are so high for those who provide the childcare. So you see how that vicious cycle goes. And that's something that I think as a community we need to stand up and look at and say, how can we make sure that we're providing quality and affordable childcare to empower people to have greater impact on our community, and also to make sure that the needs of our children are being taken care of.
There's nothing wrong with that answer, except that the programs and services that were mentioned all seem to be the first ones cut when we have budget problems. So whether it's a school district cutting their programs, whether it's the city cutting funds to the library, cutting funds to park and recreation, cutting funds to police activity league, I think the commitment continually has to be that we're not building for me, we're building for my kids and my grandkids, those that are the future. And to strip away the pathway or the hope from those particular people just lead to a host of troubles that are manifested later on in life that never should have happened, and also rob those people of their opportunity. Couple examples, a year or two ago in the budget, we almost had the loss of a program on the Mesa at Monroe School for after-school children. I led the way to keep that for at least a year. Ms. Taylor mentioned affordable childcare, which is a huge, huge problem in this county. That is also a component of the La Cumbre redevelopment project, an opportunity to put an affordable childcare facility in that at the expense of the project. So there are ways that you can attack that, but I think the overall strategy has to recognize that you're building for the future.
Thank you. We'll have one more question and then closing statements. And this is kind of a sort of an open-ended question. What do you think is the biggest problem that needs to be fixed in the 2nd District, and how would you go about fixing it?
Well, I think that's a day of the week answer on what your biggest problem is any day of the week. I would tell you that the items that I've been focused most on the last year are short-term vacation rentals, taking up housing in the 2nd District, in the coastal zone, and leaving housing vacant when it's not being used by a short-term vacation rental. So just, who knows, make up a number on how much it's vacant. But it's removing a traditional move-in or move-up spot that this community has had historically for first or second buyers of homes. And the other problem, or the other issue I've been working on over the last year most is relates to fire prevention and fire safety. We have 2 coastal high fire districts in on the Mesa that have seen the Loma fire a little more than a couple of years ago, and seem to be lined up as the next place that a catastrophe would happen, because we already admit that we have a high fire hazard area up in the hills, but we haven't recognized that it's also able to come all the way down to the water. So those would be the 2 items that I would put at the top of the list.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
I would say that some of the biggest concerns for the Mesa is to make sure that we're not hyper-focusing in other aspects and areas of our community to the detriment of Mesa businesses and Mesa residents, and to make sure that those voices have an avenue as well, and their needs are being recognized. And while I do recognize that it's an astounding district, you know, it doesn't require a lot of tampering, but that being said, it also doesn't, we need to make sure we're not neglecting the needs. So connecting with the businesses on a regular basis, connecting with the residents, and finding opportunities to have open conversations about the needs. I think that resources and facilities is probably in my experience, is the greatest challenge on the Mesa, and saying, are these resources available the way that they were intended to be available to the community when they were built? I mean, it's Mesa tax dollars that built these facilities, and they should be available to the community as the community desires them to be. And I think that's probably the biggest one.
Thank you. Now I guess I'd give you 90 seconds for a closing statement. And I think start with Mr. Jordan. And we start the last one, the opening with Ms. Taylor, so we'll start the closing with Mr. Jordan.
Thank you again for to everybody that played a part in hosting this. And again, I'll just reiterate, it seemed like a little bit of a drought for District 2. I welcome the opportunity to see and meet people that, other than for an event like this or somebody being able to watch it streaming or taped afterwards, probably would have never met me. There's 6,000 households in the Mesa. It's a little tough to say you've met everybody or talked to everybody. And unfortunately, most people that that meet you are meeting you for not the best of reasons. They have a complaint or a concern, rather something to be excited about. So I'm thankful for this opportunity. I think I'd just leave you with two thoughts, two asks, two wishes. One of those would be that you would join me in the next 4 years to continue my service to both the city and District 2. And the other one would be that you recognize that the national, local, state situation we're in is just not a good one these days. The monitor mentioned it earlier, civility. I call it constructive discussion. And I hope that we realize that when we wake up every day, what a wonderful place we are, how fortunate we are to be here, the blessings that we have that many, many other communities don't have. And we start our conversations, our discussions, and even our arguments from that foundation and work collaboratively to work on the solutions to them.
Thank you very much. Ms. Taylor?
What a great way of transition right over there. So thank you very much for that, Mike. I agree 1,000% that we need to start having conversations with the idea that we're working together and collaborating to find solutions for our community and overcome any challenges that we face. So it's not a battle. It's a project. It's a community project. And while I know my roots here aren't the most deep, I don't have generations of family background here, they are dynamic. And I bring to the table a very fresh perspective and an appreciation for what a dynamic place that Santa Barbara is. And my community involvement as far as bringing the 1 Million Cups program here in 2019 and running that for 5 years for free for the community, almost solo. Please come. We'd love to talk to you about starting a business in Santa Barbara. And volunteering with programs like Habitat for Humanity and the Freedom Warming Centers, and my involvement with First United Methodist Church, and lots of the Community Environmental Council and Creeks Week. These are things that I think just demonstrate that I'm here and I care, and I hope that you select me to represent you and bring that voice and that perspective to the City Council table and empower me to take care of the Mesa District. Thanks again to League of Women Voters, the CEC, and everyone else who put this event together.
Thank you very much. That concludes a round of applause for our candidates. Thank you, our candidates. Thank you very much. Good forum. We probably need to switch the table because we have 5 candidates total for the second part of their forum, and they won't fit there. So if you can give us a couple of minutes, we will switch the tables, get the candidates for the 1st and 3rd districts set up, and resume as quickly as possible. I'm waiting for the high sign from the media gurus here. Ready to go? Hi, we're back. I'd like to introduce the candidates, starting from that side. As Cruzito Cruz, Wendy Santamaria, Alejandra Gutierrez, Tony Becerra, I got it wrong, and Oscar Gutierrez. Mr. Cruz, Ms. Santamaria, and Ms. Gutierrez are running for the 1st District, which is on the east side, and Mr. Becerra and Mr. Gutierrez are running for the 3rd District on the west side. So I'm guessing you heard how that works. So let's get started. I should tell you that some of the questions you're going to get are pretty much the same as the ones of the 2nd District, and some of them are going to be different. Not quite sure. The first question is the same. The office that you seek requires an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of California. And people have different views of what that Constitution means. What does the Constitution mean to you? I'm going to start with Mr. Cruz.
Thank you very much, Shane Stark, for moderating. I would like to thank CEC for sponsoring this event and the people present.
You have to push the things so the green lights.
Check 1, check 2, check 3. Vote for me, District 1. Cruzito Herrera Cruz. I am a constitutionalist. I've been a constitutionalist all my life. We as the people derive our power from this pocket part, Constitution. I'll probably be the only candidate that carries a Constitution with me in my binder as a constitutionalist. The principle of equalitarianism I've used in my past elections. What does that mean? Equalitarianism is that everybody is treated under Santa Barbara law equally. As a constitutionalist, I fought for voting rights when it was an at-large system and we needed representation. This was my dream come true. The people standing here, representing, being civic contribution, public stewards, giving back to the fabric of our community. That was the essence of my dream. Thank you for filling it. Thank you. Gracias. And in that sense, as a constitutionalist, it's utmost that we treat those that don't have the public good, public service, we need to protect them. That's the value of our community.
Thank you. Ms. Santamaria, we'll go this way, this question.
Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone that has been involved in putting this forum together. My name is Wendy Santamaria, and I 100% aim to protect the people that the Constitution aims to represent. And I firmly believe that that includes every single person in our jurisdiction, in the city of Santa Barbara in particular, everyone that lives in our city limits. For me specifically, thanks to Mr. Cruz that we have district elections, my focus is of course on the east side, but also the city overall. In a city like this, there is such beautiful diversity, and I want to make sure that we preserve that and that we create a community that allows this diversity to thrive. My goal is to make Santa Barbara a place where local families can grow up here, they can raise their children, the folks that keep our city running are actually able to afford to live in the city they serve. Regardless of their race, gender, age, where they were born, where they're from, if you're contributing to this city, I highly believe that you deserve a safe, affordable home. You deserve safe streets. A lot of this is basic, right? But this is what our tax dollars are going to, and my goal as your next city council member is to ensure that the taxes that we pay from our hard-earned paychecks are truly going to yielding the results that we're asking for. Safe homes, safe streets, increase public safety, and a better Santa Barbara.
Thank you. If you could pause for 30 seconds, I've got a note. I have noticed that I have forgotten to let you guys give opening statements. So how about this? We continue with this question, then you give the opening statements. That'll work.
Oh.
Ms. Gutierrez.
So the Constitution, it definitely is a representation of all American values, but most importantly, I think the Constitution really holds those people in power to have a balance. It really has detailed values and rules of how to keep people in power like us accountable. It also, it's a living document, and within that living document, I think it's, as citizens and as people in leadership, we have to continue fighting to protect that document. And an example of that is the Equal Rights Amendment, and an example of that is the Roe versus Wade. And so I think that the Constitution is really our base on how we create policy, but also the balance between policy and justice.
I would say that the writers of the Constitution are a lot smarter than me, and they understood the process of how government works and how we make mistakes, and they made it so it was a living document, and we need to remember that, because sometimes we get into this course of we think this is right, but we really need to change directions and adjust. And so that's a great aspect of the Constitution, but I know that one of the most important things is for us to protect our citizens. So focusing on public safety is a must. Giving our public servants all the resources they need to do their job, to do the best job, and they have the best in this community. I think that's a huge key. So I think it's a process for us to deal with this. If I'm elected, is looking at that and see how we can apply it best for our local government. Thank you.
And Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you very much. I am proud to say that I've taken that oath 3 times in my life. The first time was when I worked for the Carpinteria City Hall as their broadcaster, and I was in charge of making sure that the people of Carpinteria had access to the government meetings that were making the decisions in their community, and I was very proud of that. Then I've taken it 2 times since taking office as well. And it's one of the 3 most memorable moments of my life, because it's also the same oath that our first responders take, our police officers and our firefighters. And it's something really humbling and relatable when you take that oath and you know that they're taking the same oath as well. And I've shown my dedication to the Constitution when we were getting an influx of racist public commenters that were calling in virtually, and some of my colleagues wanted to limit virtual access to our meetings because of that, and I protested against it. I didn't, even though I didn't agree with what those people were calling, I was not going to infringe on their right for them to say it. So I uphold the Constitution. I've been doing it for well over 10 years now, 20 years, and I will keep doing it.
Thank you. And now, again, with my apologies, opening statements. I think we'll start going the other way, starting with Mr. Gutierrez and ending with Mr. Cruz. Just an opening statement, 2 minutes to say what you want.
Thank you very much. I'm Santa Barbara City Council member Oscar Gutierrez, and I'm looking for your support and your vote for my re-election to the 3rd District seat. I worked really hard to become the most responsive and accessible city council member in our city's history, and I will continue to do that. I've only voted to make sure that our first responders are taken care of. I've made sure that our infrastructure is being upgraded and maintained, and it's already been planned for the future. So I'm proud of that. I've also been very passionate of making sure of giving the youth access to open play areas like their school campuses and parks by making sure that we allocated funding and resources to making sure that it was safe for them to do so. And I will continue to do so when re-elected. And also protecting people's ability to participate virtually in our meetings so that they have access to the meetings that we conduct that affect the city and the laws that we follow. I want to make sure that everybody knows that we're being as transparent as possible and making sure that we have access to our meetings, and us electeds is pivotal to that, and I will keep upholding that when re-elected. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Becerra.
Not Italian, so I'm a Santa Barbara local, native, born and raised, family man, father of 3, a business owner, a community servant. I've been involved with so many different nonprofits and community service organizations in Santa Barbara my whole adult life. Even when I was a young kid, growing up at La Casa de Raza with my family members, volunteering there all the time. I was stuck there a lot of times, but I learned a lot over the years. And what I'm finding myself now in a situation where I need to stand up for our people on the west side, be able to give them the services they need. The services are lacking, open space for the kids to play, better streets, safer sidewalks, better lighting, just the overall feel of what's not happening now. And so that was why I entered this race, to really stand up for our community. Being that I have a martial arts school on the west side, and I'm like the downtown center of it, the parents sit in my lobby and they talk. And so over the years, I've been on the west side for 28 years, so it's not like it's just one generation, it's multiple generations that I've been a part of. And I find that they come to me on the regular. They trust me. They know that I get things done when I put my mind to it. With a lot of the organizations that I run are successful because of my input. And I want to take that experience and bring it to Santa Barbara, to our city council, to be able to move things forward. I'm able to bring private sector and nonprofits and contributors to be together to get things solved, to get money going where it needs to go, and to bring the people together. Right now, it's just a matter of uniting Santa Barbara. We're so divided, and my goal is to bring us together, move forward in the direction with a vision, with hope, and I think I can do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gutierrez.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is Alejandra Gutierrez. I'm currently your 1st District City Council, and I'm running for re-election because I want to finish what I started. I'm local as well. I was born and raised here, went through the public school system. My background's in education, and I worked for the school district a little over 20 years. And I've been a public servant in my community. The reason that I won the first time was because I was very well known in the community. And those 8 votes really reflected the power that the individuals in my district had. And so it was a huge win for the community when I got elected. And it was also a huge win for those like Crucito Cruz that participated in forming district elections, because I am a product of what district elections was all about, to really voice the locals' values and their issues, and putting the people's concerns first instead of political agendas or outside opinions from the district. I have always been known to building community. I never left. I understand the dynamics of the city, but most importantly right now, since we have a housing crisis, and we also have a lot of division than ever in our city. For the first time, and I'm 41, I've never seen teachers almost going on to strike. And so there's a lot of tension in the community. And in order to be able to address the housing crisis issue that we have in the city, we cannot divide. We cannot put political agendas before the people's need, and we need to bring everyone to the table, from finance institutions, from renters to property owners to developers and to government agencies, from state and local. And so we need to build community to get out of our problems.
Thank you. Ms. Santa Maria.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Wendy Santamaria, and I am one of your candidates for Santa Barbara City Council in District 1. I entered this race after a few years of local community members asking me to, and more importantly, I entered this race after years of working with the community to advance the interest of working families, whether or not we had a majority support in our city council. And running for office is a lot of hard work, but it's so worth it when the community that I've been working with for years gives me so much hope and gives me such a big push to say, go for it, you can do this. And in my years in advocating for working families here, I started doing that because that's just who I am. I also live paycheck to paycheck. I'm a renter. I understand the dynamics of renting from the open market, and I understand the dire need of working families who simply cannot afford to live in the city they serve. Our housing crisis is putting a major strain, especially on small businesses who can't afford to retain a reliant workforce. We are seeing families have to uproot their children because they can no longer afford to live in the place that they were growing up in at first. And in order for us to preserve our local community, we must address the root causes of this housing crisis. And one solution won't be a catch-all. It won't solve the whole thing. We need to approach this from a collaborative perspective in which we bring in all of the stakeholders to the table. Because at the end of the day, we need to look at what is most popular in our city. And right now, what the community has overwhelmingly been asking for is for a stop to the bleeding of families that we're seeing in Santa Barbara. We want investments in our community. We want investments in public infrastructure. And we want a representative who will show up, and that's who I'll be for you.
Thank you. And Mr. Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Shane Stark. Well, the public in Santa Barbara might not know I'm running. I've been censored from this political campaign. Here on August 28th, Hap Freud, Joshua Molina, Jerry Roberts censored me. I wasn't at that TV Santa Barbara forum. The Independent has censored me. This is a candidate forum with 2 candidates. Where's my face? I've run hard. It's difficult to run in Santa Barbara with a shoestring campaign. The Independent has censored me. Why isn't my face there? Again, we got to be careful. Santa Barbara Talks with Joshua Molina interviewed this young lady, Santa Barbara Talks, on 5/11. On 5/18, her campaign kicked off at Ortega Park. Her number is a 951. It's a Riverside number. It's called a transplant. And then she registered to vote where she lives now on May 31st. So you have Joshua Molina interviewing a candidate that's not even registered in District 1. That's tough. Good afternoon, buenas tardes. Yo me llamo Crucito Herrera Cruz. My name is Crucito Herrera Cruz. I was born and raised in this community. I went to Las Flores Preschool. I went to Monroe School. I went to Adams, La Crimba Junior High, Santa Barbara High School, Golden Tornadoes. Then I transferred to Santa Barbara High School, where I took the oath with Peter McDougal and the Board of Trustees as a student trustee. Back in the 90s, I transferred over to UCSB in political, I was a business administration major at UCSB because I wanted to do economics and be a CPA. But my politics have changed, and I went over to UCSB, political science and Chicano studies, Santa Barbara College of Law. Last 20 years, I've been an income tax preparer certified by the IRS. And so I want to use my fiscal conservatism to apply my audit skills with the IRS, the Franchise Tax Board, and apply those skills that I have saved many taxpayers in my district thousands of dollars because I do good service. So I appreciate the conversation and vote for Crucito Herrera Cruz, District 1.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next question, I think we'll go to, well, we might as well ask the rent control question. I have one rent control question. It's the same question I asked the second district candidate. Do you favor regulation on residential rents beyond current state laws, otherwise known as rent control? If so, how do you propose to give owners due process and a fair return? If not, how do you propose to achieve affordable rental housing in the city. And I think we should start with, I'll start with the first district candidates, starting with Ms. Gutierrez and ending with Mr. Cruz, and then go with the third district candidates. Let's start with Mr. Becerra and then end with Mr. Gutierrez. That clear enough? Go ahead.
Thank you for that question. It is definitely a hot topic. I have been very vocal about, I don't think rent control, rent cap, rent stabilization is the answer to our housing crisis. It is unsustainable. Right now, there is an influx. With high insurance prices, there's cancellations in home insurance, especially in this area that it's a flood zone, fire zone. You also have inflation, so property owners to be able to keep up and maintain their properties is a challenge right now, especially if you are in a stable income. We have a lot of seniors that live in our community that their houses is basically their retirement home. And it is a Band-Aid solution. It is only temporary. Every city in the state of California where rent control has been implemented hasn't solved their housing crisis. It has unintentional consequences. In theory, it sounds great, but when you put it in practice, it's not the solution. Neighborhoods get gentrified really quickly. People stop investing in their properties, and investors stop investing in the cities. The first people to move out of those cities that have rent cap are people of color, and
you can finish your sentence.
It caught me off guard. I think we need to find a better holistic solution to our housing problem, and that is bringing everybody to the table.
Thank you. Ms. Santa Maria.
Thank you. I have been organizing with our community for years on implementing a local stabilizing measure for rents, because the current cap that exists at the state level is a temporary anti-price gouging mechanism. It was implemented during COVID, and it's set to expire in 2030. We have less than 6 years left until there is zero restriction on how much rents can go up. And now for your average corporate landlord, that sounds like a dream come true, because you can up the rents as much as you want. But I'm looking out for the families. You know, most folks don't have a wage increase that is even 10% what the rent cap is now. We are seeing a massive amount of people of color already exiting our city, and there is no local rent cap. And so to say that rent cap is the thing that's going to gentrify our neighborhoods is highly misleading, because it also can't be a catch-all policy. The policy that we have been advocating for has a lot of nuance because there are so many different sectors. So it would implement caps for rent increases for the big property management companies, but it would also have a rent board in which that would serve as the place for an appeals process. So that way, when small mom and pop landlords are going through a financial, distressful solution or situation, they are able to come to that board and say, we need to raise the rents past that limit for X amount of time. And we need to be flexible in order for us to be able to protect our small mom and pops, but also protect renters.
Thank you. Mr. Cruz.
I think if we look at what's going to happen in the state with Prop 33, it's going to repeal the Cost-Hawkins Act. And by repealing that rent control and the 5% cap that it has now, which has limited cities from creating a more protective measure for renters, renters create 65% of the population in District 1 and the majority of the population in the city. Majority of the renters in the city are Santa Barbarians. So if we have to have tenant protection like in 2019 with the 5% cap, well, state law is a preemption, where in Santa Barbara, because we're a charter city, there's home rule. So we have to have current tenant protections, because the current protections that we have don't go far enough to protect the renters. This would improve the homelessness crisis by preventing evictions of the low income, extremely low income individuals in the community. We have to really consider codifying municipal law to right to return. For anyone that is evicted for renovations, they have a right to return stipulated through a tenant administration through our city to govern and protect the citizens of Santa Barbara. Again, we have to have negotiations and create tenant covenants with the landlords and negotiate. In lieu of not having affordable housing, we could have in a fee that can go to the local trust fund permanently. Again, this is a contract and rental agreements that we can work together with the landlords and renters. Cubo.
Thank you.
Cubo.
Yes, Mr. Becerra.
Oh, okay. So, excuse me, I'm against rent control. I think rent control, well, as I stated in the last forum I was in, is it just doesn't work. We haven't seen anywhere where it really works, and where they claim it works, it's some of the worst living environments you can be in. You know, it creates unintended consequences, as my partner here says, or sorry, my partner. So, so the thing is that some of the what it creates is just it's some slums. It creates people that that invested in their properties no longer can upkeep them. It makes it scares away new investors, because how we talk about getting people to come in and invest. How are you going to get them to invest if they know that they can't break even on their investments? So we got to look at the big picture. The big picture is, yes, we need to protect our tenants. Yes, I'm a renter. I don't own a property. So as I'm going through, I was evicted during COVID and had to move out of town for a while. So the idea is that working my way back was tough, but we're back, and the idea is that we have to fight for tenants' rights, but at the same time we got to be realistic about how it affects us. And overall, it doesn't work. We haven't seen it work. And the example I used with Argentina is that once they got rid of rent control, prices came down and the market opened up. So, and we see that trend now. We see more vacancies right now, and the market is doing an adjustment. And that's just the reality of being in Santa Barbara. It's tough, but we can make it work.
Thank you. Yes. So I formed the Housing Crisis Ad Hoc Committee. And in doing so, we interviewed so many different stakeholders in the housing crisis. And one of the things that kept coming up as a suggestion was rent stabilization. And these were from different groups. Either there were property owners or organizations that are specifically helping with the housing crisis. And it was something that keeps getting recommended for something that we could implement to address the housing crisis here specifically. And as Mr. Cruz mentioned, the majority of the population in Santa Barbara are renters, and this is what they're asking for consistently when I'm knocking on doors. It's something when I ask, what would you like me to work on? They've stated, I need rent control because it's too much, or sorry, not rent control, but rent stabilization. So as being a public servant, as being an elected representative, I'm here to do the will of the people. And that's what the people are asking for. So I'm here to fight for it, and as far as I can on the dais. And hopefully we can make something happen as a result of the ad hoc committee that we formed to address all the other issues as well.
Thank you. I think that covers the panel for this question. Good. The next question, I would start with Ms. Santa Maria and go to Mr. Cruz, then Ms. Gutierrez, and then Mr. Gutierrez and Mr. Becerra. I'm making Becerra. I'm from Philadelphia, and we have a problem with soft S's.
He's going to do a wah.
My next question is about jobs and business. What can the city and your district do to help existing businesses and attract non-polluting businesses that produce useful goods and services and generate good jobs? Also, with a view to helping small business people.
Great question. Thank you so much for that. So there's two components to that. So how do we help our existing businesses, and then how do we bring in new non-polluting businesses? In helping our small businesses, one of the things I've heard over and over is the issue that keeps getting brought up with street vendors. There are a lot of mixed feelings about them, but in general, some folks like them, but they, we can't overlook that there are health and safety concerns, that there are very bad potentials for them to take away business from the established businesses that are there, brick and mortar, are paying taxes. I would love to work with our city to implement different micro business zones in the city in which we can facilitate the start and flourishment of local businesses in an area that it's not affecting the other businesses. Because I don't necessarily want to stifle entrepreneurship in our city. I think there's a lot of folks here who have great ideas, and if the city were to support them, we could stimulate our local economy in a sustainable way. But we have to make sure that it's not affecting our local established businesses. Now, as far as creating new jobs, we really need to make sure that we are putting efforts and resources into renewable energies. We have, there's great promise in potentially starting microgrids in city neighborhoods to improve resilience against power outages, and many other green initiatives that would bring jobs and clean energy to our city.
Thank you. Mr. Cruz is next.
Thank you. This sentence comes from the balance statement that I have previously said in my past 6 elections. It hasn't changed. My candidacy and community's focus is to advance the economic and social revitalization of our Milpas and downtown precincts. Part of that is creating services. In the previous battle elections, how do we improve the Milpas corridor through economic development? Well, what we need is a property and business improvement district under Streets and Highways Code section 36614.5. This business improvement district has been neglected by our incumbent, has been neglected by the whole city council, has been neglected by the previous city council. And so the business owners are asking for that. We need an improvement district in the Milpas corridor. The streets are unpaved. It's the worst paved street in the city. That cannot happen to generate revenue and attract businesses. Work with the businesses through this improvement district to facilitate improvements to bring consumers to buy from the businesses.
Thank you. I believe Ms. Gutierrez is next.
Thank you. I'm actually really excited to answer this question. One of my achievements has been to be able to support our local businesses in the area. Growing up in the city, our local businesses are the ones that actually give back to our community, especially to the schools. And so one of my big priorities was to invest resources on Milpas, since it has been an area that has been neglected for many years. And just to give my opponents here a little bit of feedback, there was an association on Milpas to support local businesses, but due to political issues that came up and outside voices, that created a huge division and scars even on the local businesses. And so this is why currently we don't have a business organization on Milpas, because there was some business owners that have been there for generations were politically attacked. And so one of my goals it's been more to show the local business owners that I'm not about just promises but actions. And so what is necessary for Milpas is to actually create a safer place where people can walk safe. And I'm proud to announce that the city, since I started on council, has invested a lot of resources and money to Milpas. We're going to have new sidewalks, safer crossings on Milpas. I was very instrumental to create the Funk Zone Association with the business owners there as well.
Thank you. You're next.
Thank you. Since elected, I've been very active with our Chamber of Commerce and other business-related organizations like the Downtown Business, or Downtown Santa Barbara organization, the Food and Beverage Committee, and I hear from them what the needs of the businesses are, and I've been supportive in making sure that they get those needs met ever since I was elected. And during the pandemic, I helped out the businesses by obviously allowing them to operate outside. I even shot some free commercials for them so that they could use to advertise their business during the pandemic, and was supportive of hiring a economic development director for the city. Thank you, Mr. Cruz. And I'm willing to even do more and partner in contract with the Chamber of Commerce to further help out our local businesses, because obviously that's the lifeblood of the community. It's where most of the people are employed by. And yeah, I've been 100% pro-business and willing to do that moving forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, as a business owner for 33 years, I can see where the city falls short. And I know that I've talked to many business owners. Matter of fact, I was endorsed by the South Coast Chamber of Commerce because of my ideas and my views. And so I don't take that lightly. I know that one of the biggest complaints is the red tape. You know, you want to bring a business into town, you want to develop, have a plan, and you run into red tape all the time. I even have a neighbor who's trying to start, he started off as fixing washers and dryers. Next thing you know, the city's coming down on him, and they're telling him to tear down this and tear down that, but they won't give him a permit. And next thing you know, he's getting fined for not tearing it down without a permit, and then they want him to build a new one, and they haven't issued the permit. So it's the process. So we have to look at a better way to streamline new businesses coming in, promote local ownership, not bringing in the corporate, but trying to push and focus on helping people get started. I've helped multiple people start businesses in town, by just having great ideas and great conversations with them, and I want to continue to do that. And I know that's been always my calling, is to be a helper and to be able to bring ideas and people together and resources. So that's where I'm at with that. I think that the city, with a combination of working with the chamber and with local businessmen that have been in it for a while, they can find solutions for this problem.
Thank you. Our next question, and the timer really doesn't like me, I think. The next question, and we'll start with Mr. Becerra.
Thank you, sir.
Stuck in my head. Mr. Becerra, Mr. Gutierrez, then Mr. Cruz, Ms. Santa Maria, Ms. Gutierrez. So this question is about crime and police. How do you view the relation between the Santa Barbara Police Department and the community in your district? What would make things better?
Well, I think one of the biggest things, growing up, I grew up on the Mesa. I went to McKinley School, which is in my district. One of the best things about growing up there is that the officers were local. So we got to build these relationships. A lot of the guys that are retiring officers, they were friends of mine growing up, because they thought it was a great thing to do, to serve. And I think over the years, especially the last, 8-9 years, a lot of our law enforcement has been vilified, and I don't know why that's happening, because Santa Barbara, as was stated in the earlier debate, has the lowest incidence of bad incidents with officer involvement. And I think we need to support our law enforcement community. We need to support them, to have housing locally, be able to be part of the community like they once were. I had a cross-street neighbor who also was my tutor to help me get back into back to school level, but her brother was a police officer, and he used to just come over and just would open the car and let everybody have a part of it, and you felt like he was with you. And so I think, as we develop these opportunities with PAL programs, funding them, making sure that there's good relationships between the community and our police, I think that's where we need to be, and also give the police officers what they need to be the best at their job. And if that means making sure that the funding is good, making sure that we're investing in them so that they can do their job, and I think that's the best type of support we can give them.
Thank you.
Thank you. I fully believe that our law enforcement need to be backed up. I voted consistently to make sure that they get pay increases, made sure that our chief of police felt supported by the council, and luckily we were able to hire a new one that is really knocking it out of the park. Really proud of her and what she's been able to do. She was able to bring us her station to be fully staffed, and we've been going to the graduation ceremonies and see that there's a lot more local Latinos being hired as law enforcement, because it really makes a difference when it's community policing, and the community just grows to appreciate, respect, and admire our law enforcement as opposed to fearing them. And when we strengthened our Police and Fire Commission, a lot of the demands that were being brought to us by the community, we were pleasantly surprised that the police department had already implemented them. Like, there are already things that they were already practicing or not practicing. So it was a really proud moment to know that we have a police force that is essentially a trendsetter and leading the way for the rest of the country on what an effective and an appreciated police force can be and should be.
Thank you. I believe.
Crucito, you're up.
I think Ms. Santa Maria was next.
Oh, was it?
I believe so.
Okay.
I think that's right.
We can work with that.
It works.
Can you repeat the question one more time, please?
You want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Sure. How do you view the relationship between Santa Barbara Police Department and the community in your district, and what would make things better?
Thank you for repeating that. The relationship with our police and the community is slowly getting better, but I do think there's plenty of more work to be done. I think when it comes to, like Mr. Gutierrez mentioned, community policing is definitely a step in the right direction, but we also need to make sure that the other components of our first response teams are well equipped so as to not always have to put so much work on our police officers. When our police officers have to be the ones deployed for every single issue, that is creating a strain on our police department. And we want to make sure that they are doing what they take an oath for, right? To protect and to serve. And so there are instances, for example, at mental health calls, those are often, the police will respond, but I want to work more with our city to put more resources into our mental crisis response teams. So that's one thing. But I also want to make sure that we are giving a voice to local community groups most impacted by police brutality, because even though we have better numbers in Santa Barbara, it's still not zero. And my goal is for us to eradicate any, issues and the strain between our police department and the community. I want our community to feel safe when they see the police come around. And I think that starts by giving a voice to those marginalized, especially groups like Healing Justice. Thanks.
I believe Mr. Cruz is next.
Thank you. The relationship that the Santa Barbara Police Department has with the city is golden. They just recently, with the incumbent as the finance chair, got into a 30-year commitment of $103 million for the new police department that's going to replace where the farmers market is at. $103 million with no architectural blueprint, no EIR studies, no data behind it, just a blank check. By the end of the project, I guarantee you, this project will cost $200 million. They deserve it. Again, the police department is understaffed based on what Ms. Chief Kelly Gordon told me in council chambers. Again, I want to thank the police department for uprooting a problem that happened on the junior high, De La Guerra Street. In the De La Guerra Street, there was oversized vehicles that was creating a public nuisance, health risk, and there was some criminal illegal activity. We want to thank the club, Mark Alvarado, and all the city staff that created a solution for that problem that no longer exists there now. What can happen is that we have to give the incentive for immediate community policing. There's no beat coordinators. If there's no beat coordinators, how are we going to have rapport with the community? So that's first thing to implement. Again, good community policing deserves respect, dignity for all Santa Barbarans under the law. No harassment. Thank you. Oh, watch out. You're right, you're right. He's all right, everybody. He's all right. See or no?
Let's finish this question. go to closing statements because we're time contained. But Ms. Gutierrez.
Thank you. I have, on the 4 years and a half, I've addressed the issue of having a better rapport within our district constituents and the police department. I've been a huge advocate about creating community policing, and I'm very proud that now we have a department that has definitely achieved those goals for being a fully department filled with newly officers. And I'm proud to say that some of the last academy that graduated, I had a former student who I mentored and now became a police officer. One of my first roles in the district was I was appointed by the chief of police to be the person that I would be in charge of the high school students that were gang affiliated or on probation to make sure that they would graduate high school. And so early on, and even my experience as growing up in the city of Santa Barbara, we did have those police officers that lived in the neighborhood that were coaches, and then slowly that started to change. And officers were no longer living in the neighborhood. And you saw the dynamics changing within the community. But so firsthand, I understand the importance of building a relationship with community and police. And during my time, especially during COVID, a lot of police officers were coming straight from the academy. And because during COVID, we had the narrative that went out there about defunding the police. And in my district, people won't come up and say that we need more police officers because of the history that's been in that district, but we do. We need to be able to have safer streets. We need our police department, and we have now the Citizens Academy now in our district and I will be proud to say that one of the most influential community policing is my uncle, Adrian Gutierrez, and he is an example of a police officer that was born and raised here and that is still centralized in that community.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we are basically out of time, so let's have our closing statements. Let's have our closing statements, and I will start with Mr. Becerra, then Mr. Oscar Gutierrez, Ms. Alexandra Gutierrez, Ms. Santa Maria, and Mr. Cruz. You have cleanup. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Becerra.
All right. So, again, I'm running for a need in our community. I know Mr. Cruz said that his streets on Milpas were some of the worst streets in Santa Barbara. I beg to differ with you. If you look at San Andres right in front of my business, it's the worst. It's uneven pavement. It's just ridiculous. After my last debate, somebody fell right in front of Foodland off on the sidewalk because the bricks were sticking up. I mean, these are real things that are happening on the daily around there. So I'm standing up for my community. I'm standing up for my neighborhood, where I live. I believe that the voice, we need to have a voice, and it needs to be a community voice. Our district happens to be the lowest voter turnout of all the 6 districts. So I'm rallying for them to come together, to be the voice, to be a strong voice so that we can push together to have these changes made for our community, for our youth, safer crosswalks. Some of the crosswalks on San Andres are just horrible. They're blind crosswalks, and I'm gonna fight for better crosswalks. So it's not rocket science. It's basic, fundamental visual things that you see on the daily, and they need to be taken care of. They need to be addressed, and I'm going to be the person that addresses that for our community. So a vote for Tony Becerra is going to be a vote for you in the community, to push forward, to give us an opportunity, hopefully down the line for possibly equity and having a place to live, not just renting, but we need to take care of our locals and allow them the opportunity to live in Santa Barbara and grow old here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you. As I said earlier, me being on council, I've made history, and if reelected, I will continue to make the history. I agree that the West Side needs more attention, and that's all I've been fighting for since I've been elected. And as I said, the upgrades that are coming, they're already planned. They're planned. Like literally next week, the city is going to redo the sidewalks on San Andres. And this is something I've said for years, that this isn't like ordering a pizza. It's not going to show up to your door in 30 minutes. It's going to take a while because it has to be planned out. So if you want to know all the other upgrades that are going to be coming to the community, to the west side specifically, don't even take it from me. I'll get you in contact with the department heads themselves, and they can explain you the process. It's not about a lack of trying. There's a process to how all this stuff is getting addressed. And I will continue to make sure it's getting addressed. And I will make sure that you have access to me whenever you can, whenever you like. And I will keep on fighting the fights that you want me to fight, because that's what I'm here for. Born and raised, and yeah, proud to be a West Sider. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't remember who I said first.
It goes down.
1, 2, 3.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead.
Save the best for last.
I'm running for re-election because I want to finish the work that I've started. I have a proven record in my community of actually taking actions and not just promises that fade in the air. I've created, definitely given a voice to my district that has never had it before with, again, the resources that have been poured into that district for the last 4 years and a half, creating a stronger police department in the area of community policing. During COVID, I was out there in the trenches. I've always been very present when it has to do with creating policy that goes against what's popular. During COVID, I was out there passing food, from working with nonprofits like the Food Bank, opening the first educational pods in the city, and bringing in community together. In order to solve problems, I will continue to fight for our community values. I will continue fighting for policies that are gonna stand the test of time. But most importantly, I'm not just going to focus on the issues that we have today. I have to focus on the issues that are going to be coming in the future, because we have a younger generation. We have children and youth that we have to think about. And I need to continue being that voice of the people instead of political preferences. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Santamaria.
In my race for city council, I walk the streets of my neighborhood for 6 days a week. And before I started this campaign, I had been walking these streets either way, sharing information on know your rights for tenants, know your rights as workers. How do you organize against the powers that be that are keeping our working families living paycheck to paycheck, forcing families out of our community and thereby crumbling the fabric of the city? In my role as a community organizer, my day job as a union rep, as in every capacity that I've had, I've spent the last almost decade working with city staff, with current city council members, and wanting to move progress for our city forward, because this is a position that cannot be taken for granted. This is it used to be 5, now it's a 4-year position. And this isn't a position you only show up for 6 months before re-election. We see that from many, many politicians, and our families can no longer afford somebody that is absent from key decisions. We need to be able to bring the community in. And when you vote for me to be your next city council member, you're voting for all of your voices to be in there, because the same way that everything I've been advocating for has been a collective effort, everything that I vote for, I can guarantee you will be encompassed from all of the various voices and stakeholders. And at the end of the day, I would be proud to have your vote, and you can go on votewendysantamaria.org to see all of the endorsements and the community support that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Cruz.
Yes, muchas gracias. Thank you very much to the organizers of this forum. My name is Crucito Herrera Cruz. I was born in this community. I come from Trinidad Burquez Cruz, a Yaqui indigenous man from Arizona. My mom, Marcelina Herrera, a Mexica Nahua. So I'm indigenous, but I'm Americano Chicano. By being an Americano Chicano, I have the privilege to come back to how we started. As a constitutionalist, I've defended the Constitution when it was required, when no one believed in district-based elections. What's important in this community is the League of Women Voters bar graph. The blue is represented the 5th cycle. The red is the 6th cycle housing element. There is such a housing crisis in Santa Barbara that no one's attending to and no one's really talking about. The Housing Authority of City of Santa Barbara has a 5-year plan. I met with the executive director. There's already a 5,000 waiting list, and there's 4,500 already waiting just to get on the waiting list. So looking at the dynamics in Santa Barbara, it's interesting how the Democratic Party is nonpartisan, but it has influences. It seems like it's the same picture that I'm holding up, but it's the 2 candidates. One picture is of 2019, and one's a picture of 2024. Exactly the same cultural appropriation that this partisan group has, and it has influenced the way that the narrative has gone. Why? Ask your question, why isn't Crucito in the newspapers, in the Independent, in the News Hawk? So by cleaning it up, we have to clean up our democracy because it's unfair, it's undemocratic, it's un-American, and vote for Crucito Herrera Cruz will get you a fighter at City Hall for all of Santa Barbara and all the districts, because we need district-based elections. I should cut it off.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's have a round, that's it. Let's have a round of applause for our candidates. Everybody. Again, thank you for participating. Gracias.
You're welcome. De nada.
De nada. Right. Thanks to TVSB, Silvia Uribe for translation, CEC for the facilities, and all the volunteers for the League of Women Voters who helped with this forum. Please watch our pros and cons forum on the state and local ballot measures on TVSB Zoom webinar on October 9th. And please make sure you are correctly registered to vote and vote. Your registration must be postmarked or submitted electronically by October 21st, 2024. I believe that's correct. Please make sure you're registered at the correct address. Really, your vote matters. Please register and please drive safely. Good evening. I will never lose the Pennsylvania accent. It's like inbred.
I hear you. I was just doing I did a rally 2 weeks ago in Philadelphia for raising awareness about violence against women and girls in Independence Square, and they all talk like you.
Yes, they do. They say Wooder too.
And
they have very strange taste in food. There's another silly bitch. Thank you. Glad you enjoyed it.